All right, and in this week, there's one story that is dominating the headlines and is very, very important for both of us, is the UK election that finally took place. Now, Brexit and the UK have been in a serious turmoil for the last couple of years, and we're starting to see some serious changes, and recently a huge election there in the UK, and Chad's got a lot of information to tell us about what happened, what the sentiment's like, and what's going on down there. So Chad, take us away.
Absolutely. So, yeah, pretty much over the weekend, we woke up to the results of the general election. So, obviously, Boris Johnson taking a bit of a gamble on basically the next step to his Brexit campaign and calling it a general election. And essentially, the results are telling it was a major success. Basically, a lot of the North and the Midlands have turned. So, you've got constituencies that have never voted Conservatives in the past. They've always been Labour-dominated parties, and all of a sudden they are now blue. So if you look at the map of the UK before and after, there were scatters of red all about before, but now a kind of resounding blue, sort of in the north and the Midlands. So basically, this is Labour's worst results since the 1930s.
Sure.
Their leader, Jeremy Corbyn, obviously not pleased, made a statement at the end of this that he would not be leading another party in another campaign, but he's not yet stepped down. He wants to make sure that he has oversight over who is the next leader, and basically to kind of make sure that the succession plan is in order. And also on the highlights note, the Lib Dem leader, Jo Swinson, lost her seat as well. So this was quite an interesting thing to follow. The Conservatives have taken majority and now have everything they need to essentially pass the Brexit deal that they have got. What's it looking like on that side? What's everyone's sentiment?
Yeah, it's surprising. I was curious to find out what was the expectation on that side. As far as I understand, this is quite an upset. I think it was expected the Conservatives would probably win, but with this kind of majority, seems to be quite a surprising result. And as you say, to see like counties and areas which previously were the other way to now do this big switch really says something about it. And to watch Boris do the same gamble that Theresa May did a couple of months ago and have a completely different result is really interesting. So I was wondering, is it as surprising as I think it is, Chad?
Absolutely. So, as I said, this is Labour's worst result since the 1930s. It is the Conservative Party's biggest majority since the 1980s. And certainly it was a surprise to, I think, a lot of people. And Brexit obviously being the overriding factor in this one. So, if you look at the referendum and the counties that voted to leave, those counties have now switched to the Conservatives because they're pretty much fed up over what Labour has done. And essentially they're kind of not having a clear message for Brexit, and essentially the Conservatives' manifesto of Get Brexit Done was clear, concise, and essentially delivered.
I think also another subplot that's worth discussing is what this means for Scotland as well. We've seen that the likelihood of a Scotland referendum now goes way up because of this result. And so this could be the tipping point for a lot of change in the United Kingdom, not just in Great Britain itself, but in the surrounding areas. I think it's going to be a very interesting pivoting point as to whether Boris can finally get this done now with all the support that he needs. He really has no excuses now. And assuming they get Brexit done, what does it mean for Scotland going forward? It's going to be interesting to watch.
Well, that's the thing. I think what's really good is following the victory, he kind of made it very clear that he wants to reward the trust of the people who have switched. And so it definitely doesn't sound like he's kind of just going to take their votes and not really honour them. So, in terms of Scotland and that point, SNP, kind of taking the majority there. And, there's definitely certainly calls for independence on Scotland's front. So that'll definitely be interesting to watch. The thing that I'm quite interested in, and certainly in monitoring over time, aside from Brexit and that now all coming to a close, potentially beginning of next year, this is now the opening up for the Conservative parties for the next 5 years. And so I think something that's really important for us to monitor over that time is to hold them accountable for all of the promises that they made at the time of the manifesto. So I just did a little bit of a dump just so we can have a quick look at what those were. So some of the top notes: extra funding for the NHS, 50,000 more nurses and 50 million more GP surgery appointments a year. Quite a big commitment to make that side. 20,000 more police and tougher sentencing for criminals. an interesting one for me, and also for any South Africans listening, is looking at putting through an Australian-style points-based system to control immigration. Now, obviously, we know immigration, one of the reasons why Brexit came about in the first place, people not feeling that Britain is Britain anymore. So this looks like quite an interesting one to add, and I think, definitely seems like a productive way of doing it. So control the borders, but at the same time have a little bit of fairness in letting people who qualify come in and out. And following on from that, a bunch of other things. But I think those are sort of the cliff notes that I think we should be tracking over time.
Yeah, I'd like to discuss the immigration thing a little bit more as well. I think the point system is an interesting idea, and we've seen lots of variations in Australia, in Canada, in the US, etc. And this open borders policy versus immigration, and this whole debate that's happening all around the world is really on a knife edge at the moment, and it feels like countries are trying to figure out whether they want to go full open borders and let as many immigrants in as possible. And a lot of developing countries are doing that because they want the talent to come in and they need the workers. Places like Japan and whatnot who need workers to prop up their aging economy. And then you've got the opposite side of the coin, people like the US who want to keep as many people out as possible because they're trying to protect the interests of their own people. And these point systems are an interesting way to try and look at various criteria that someone brings to the table and almost to value that potential citizen and figure out, are they going to be a net contributor to society? And that contribution is obviously very arguable and debatable, and those point systems can often be gamed. Like, if you know exactly what the points are doing, you can often game it and make your application in a way that matches those points. And so there's a lot of behavioral science and a lot of difficult thinking that needs to go in place before you implement something like that. I know for friends of mine who are trying to get from South Africa into various other countries, they live and breathe that point system. They know it backwards. They know exactly what they need to do in order to get the right result there. And so I think a lot of this will come with time and figuring out what is the right balance in that system and what kind of criteria matters. But philosophically, it's very interesting to debate what those criteria are and what you should be valuing, what you should be celebrating, right? Whether it's just academic achievement, whether it's financial incentives, whether it's all sorts of religious or ethical or social criteria. It's interesting to think about each country is trying to do it for their own background and their own immigration policy. And it's something that I've been fascinated by in the last few months, and watching it unfold is very interesting to see how different countries deal with it in different ways.
Definitely, yeah, completely agree. It's really an interesting topic, and we'll have to see what sort of policies they come up with. But it's certainly interesting to follow, as I said, for South Africans who used to, a while back, have the option of coming here on sort of work visas. Obviously, we know New Zealand and Australia have similar type situations, and it's very common. It's almost like a rite of passage for somebody who's living in New Zealand to come and spend about 2 years here in London after, and then moving back afterwards. So it'll be really nice for us to open up that opportunity again for South Africans and others from around the world. I think it's just a nice thing for us to monitor. So yeah, certainly interesting developments there, and we'll have to see how the Conservative Party gets on, and hopefully everyone who voted that way doesn't regret it in the end. Across the pond with Barry and Chad.